The firms are selling an identical product, though this is very important, and they are price takers. And the best part of it, the market share does not influence the price. This large population of buyers and sellers coming into the market is very, very important, which means to say supply and demand remain constant in the market. The advantages and disadvantages might be good for the consumer, but very bad for the economy, because in the real world, perfect economy does not exist. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 3, first semester Business Economics for BBA, where we are going to talk about market structure. Now, the most interesting part of a market structure is that it has got different types of competition. So starting from a perfect competition, we're going to get into the different forms of market structure. We're going to explain and understand how exactly a market structure determines the entire economy. Starting with the perfect competition or the pure competition, that's an idealized market condition where many sellers compete to offer best prices and large sellers have got no advantage over the small ones. Perfect competition is a scenario that rarely occurs in the market. Why? Because equal number of buyers and equal number of sellers. Now everybody has got a perfect information. The product price is already determined, so you don't have to worry more. There is a buyer, there is a seller. The equation is pretty much straight, so you don't have to worry here. And this model is something where you match the supply demand exactly. So not much of an interest, not much of a competition, and you're not going to create any heat in the market. So this is a kind of a market that you would see, it's a very, very idealistic kind of a thing. So really, this does not create that competitive effect that we are thinking about in the market economy. Nevertheless, because there are many buyers and sellers that we are talking about, this is purely going to be determined by the supply and demand effect. The more the supply, more the demand. So, you're going to match it, you're going to balance the equation on both sides, and then you're going to see that you're just going to make enough profit to make yourself float, to just make yourself be alive in the market for some time. So this is a kind of market that you don't want to get into, because you are not making the actual profit. You're not going to dominate the market. You're not going to tell the people that I have just arrived. You're just going to be in the market to survive, to make your company understand that I am still floating around. I'm still available for most of you in terms of just accumulating few numbers here and there. Now, why would people get into this kind of a market? Is because you are seeing a market which is quite saturated, or rather you are seeing a market where everybody is already present. So you're not going to make any great amount in return. So that would where, people can easily enter and exit kind of a market. So you don't get involved yourself in terms of excess profits. Now, how perfect competition works is a benchmark or an ideal kind of a thing where market structures can be compared. That this is purely a theoretical kind of a thing against the monopoly, in which there is only a single firm or a supply, and where the consumers have got no alternative in a monopoly market. But then in a perfect competition, you have alternatives coming up. Now let's try to understand it more detailedly. Now if you look into the electronics market in particular, just to give you an example, you can see brands starting from Nokia to Motorola to Samsung to Apple to probably any kind of brands that we are talking about today. Now what happens in the electronic market is that you have many substitutes, you have a fantastic pricing phenomenon, you have a lot of offers kept in place, and you know exactly how to lure the customers towards your site. Now that's where exactly a perfect competition starts standing out. Why? Because everybody is trying to offer you the same kind of price. Everybody is giving you some instant offers. Everybody is trying to give you the best among the market. In that situation, what happens? The customer is left and he's completely spoilt by choice. So in that scenario, the customer does have too many alternatives, so he can select. So most of the companies are not going to make any great margin. On the other hand, a monopoly is exactly opposite to that of a perfect market, where the consumer is left with no alternative at all. Now moving further, as we stay on with the perfect competition, you also need to know that the firms are selling an identical product, though this is very important, and they are price takers, and the best part of it, the market share does not influence the price. Now you are getting into a very, very theoretical phase of the economy. The first thing, it's an identical product. So if I sell mobile, that's what you're also selling. If I sell earpods, that's what the other company is also doing. So what is so great different? Now probably you might say that my brand is better than yours, but people are not going to listen to that theory. People are going to listen to the factor that the word called pricing. If I can sell an earpod at 1599, the same price applicable to you also apply the same theory there. So what is happening is that we all have the same product stacked together in the market with a similar kind of pricing, so there's not much of differentiation at all. The second thing is that firms are price takers. So what the consumer dictates, the price is being taken by the company. The firm is not going to dictate the price. That's exactly where we are going opposite to the market. The firm is just going to listen to the consumer. The consumer comes and says, I'm not going to pay you 1,500. I want this product at 1,200. The firm says yes. Why? Because you don't have much of an option at all. What you are going to do is that just listen to the consumer, because you want the product to be sold, and you also know that there are n number of alternatives already available in the market. So you don't have a choice of bargaining, putting your terms and conditions. You're not going to create a fight scenario for the consumer. Rather, you're just going to listen exactly what the consumer wants, deliver exactly what the consumer wants, and make the deep discount offer even better. So that's exactly where I say you cannot influence the market price of the products, followed by which the market share does not influence price. Just by being a market leader doesn't mean that I govern over the prices, I command over the prices. That's not going to happen at all. Why? Because equally there are players who are going to come inside, they're going to decide who you are and what you are. So at that scenario, what you need to understand that by being a market leader, you are not being dominant in the market at any given point of time. Followed by which buyers have a complete or a perfect information about the product that's been sold, so they know about the past, present and future. Now that's fantastic. As we are talking about, capital resources and labor are perfectly mobile. Firms can enter and exit at any point of time. Now let's come back to this very, very important point called as the complete information. As a buyer today, I know exactly the price of a product even before I purchase it, even before I go to the showroom. Now that exactly makes the market intense altogether. Why? Because earlier there were days when people did not have the information about the price of the product unless and until it is disclosed by the shopkeeper. But today the scenario is completely changed thanks to the technology, thanks to Amazon, Flipkart or MYSURU or Ajio and all this kind of websites and platforms that are being giving the customer an edge to know things even more better. So before even I land up in the showroom, I know exactly the prices. I also know what is the trend that is going on. So the company does not have a chance of camouflaging me, trying to put me into some marketing stances altogether. I know exactly what price is, so he cannot go overboard. The second thing, capital resources and labor are available. So, it's perfect situation there. You are getting your resources, you have your people on stand, so you're not going to move away from that. And firms can enter and exit. So this is typically again a theoretical situation. If I believe that today I want to be a part of the market, yes, welcome. The market is giving you an entry. Tomorrow I find that I'm saturated, I'm not able to sell more, I can just quit and say goodbye. That situation happens only in a theoretical factor. Why? Because let's just understand a very critical word: without cost. If you want to enter a market, there is a cost, and if you want to exit the market gives you a higher cost altogether. But in a perfect market competition, theoretically, we believe that without cost. So please understand this point very clearly. This is purely a theoretical scenario. Why? Because without cost, it is impossible for you to survive or stay or to exit out of the market. Everything comes with a cost. There is no free lunch concept at all. Now, moving further, we're going to talk about this characteristics where we are also talking about a large and homogeneous market, because we all know that the products are similar, so we're going to sell that market exactly in the similar kind of a situation. Every market is selling the same kind of product. You don't have to adjust at all. The market mechanism adjusts automatically. The price is the same, the selling mechanism is the same, and you're going to sell the same kind of product at a much subdued price, because you will not have that aggression to sell it across. Now, this large population of buyers and sellers coming into the market is very important, which means to say supply and demand remain constant in the market. So at some point of time, if I'm going to talk about this demand and the supply curve, we are meeting the equilibrium point so well that we don't have to worry at all. That equilibrium point is kept exactly intact. I'm not moving it. I'm not trying to create a ruffle in the market. I'm not going to create any kind of shakeout there. Why? Because I'm still standing exactly at the midpoint. So which means to say that market neither moves up or move down. It's a neutral condition. It's a win-win situation. Rather, I would say that it's a completely sold out situation there. So no need to worry about the perfect market competition. Now what happens is that since the information is perfect and things starts going down the rail, this is where exactly for the sourcing and for the supplier also, pricing can make or break for the company. Now what happens is that people know to that extent how much do you source, where do you source from, who is your supplier, what is the price under which you are talking about, and what kind of market are you entering altogether. So the information about the patterns, about the initiatives the company is taking into it can develop a competitive figure altogether, and for the companies it becomes very difficult to survive, because all these conditions are highly intensive in terms of research base and factors. So this is definitely going to be a tough market for your sellability standpoint. Now with that, the absence of control, because there's no control for you to enter and exit the market, is completely free for you to just come in, log in and log out kind of a situation that I'm talking about. Now the absence of control is a very big factor. Why? Because practically speaking, tomorrow if I want to start my business in Dubai, I want to start my business in Singapore, I want to start it in Malaysia or in Australia or in any part of the world, there are certain governmental rules and regulations, there are certain laws by which I need to abide before I start getting into the market. But here I'm talking about a market where there is absolutely no control. You can just walk in and walk out, which is theoretically possible and practically impossible. So with that, we know that there's also an efficient transportation that's also coming into picture, because you have a cheap and an efficient transport. That means significant costs do not incur, and this helps you to reduce the product price, cut back on the delays of transporting. So the supply chain is also very much predefined, which means to say that all the cost that is incurred in terms of middlemen, the transporting, the packaging, shipping out, everything is very well covered. So you don't have to worry much about the perfect competition. Now, what are the barriers that prohibit, that limit the availability of firms? Consumer awareness has increased. All these things are putting a barrier here. Why they are barrier? Because as you start making the consumer more and more informative, as you start making the consumer more stronger, automatically the situation becomes tighter and the companies have to find new methods to survive altogether. Now, the advantages and disadvantages might be good for the consumer but very bad for the economy, because in the real world, perfect economy does not exist. I repeat on this. Why? Because most of the people might think that, is there an economy exactly like this where I just walk in and I get the price I want? Absolutely not. Why? Because price is always a subject to bargaining concept. We are not going to just walk into the shop and say that I want it for 10 rupees and the shopkeeper immediately gives you for 10. That's not going to happen at all. Why? Because perfect market is just an idealistic theory that we have been talking about. And the value of a perfect market competition is accurate only to the extent that it reflects the conditions. And then, when you actually get into the actual market conditions, you see the competition that's existing, you see the amount of, intensity that between the sellers, then automatically the market scenario changes. Now, one notable feature that I would like to talk about here is that the low profit margin, so they have access to all the kind of thing. And second thing is that the absence of innovation. So I'm going to talk about profit margins and innovations. Why? Because when the profit margins are low and pretty much the market is trying to just dispose the goods at the same level of price, you will have consumers walking into all the shops because they are getting the products at a very, very low price, at rather, a price that they would have expected. So in that scenario, what happens is that they are trying to get a high-end product at a low price, at a very, very subdued price rather, I would say. So that keeps the consumers floating in the market at any point of time. They are happy about it that you're getting things at a very much, subdued, at a lower level altogether. But then the most important thing here is that the lack of innovation, that is also we need to understand in economics. One side, when the market is getting completely filled with the consumer, but the other side, there is no innovation. I'm just selling the product which was sold yesterday. I'm not trying to reinvent. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just going with the flow, and I'm seeing that everything it's happening on the same way. Now, followed by which the market morphology is also being used for different terms and purposes. If you start seeing that, we will now come into the different markets altogether. Followed by which we start getting into a monopoly, we get into a duopoly, we also get into a monopolistic competition. So let's first try to understand what's a monopoly market. A monopoly market is one where we'll have one seller and large number of buyers. Now, this is the real market altogether. Everybody wants to become a monopoly altogether. They want to become a monopolist. Why? Because they can control the market through the price. Moment you make the market in such a way that there are no alternatives available, you start ruling the market, and market completely becomes intensive altogether. Nobody has got any options there. A duopoly market is where there are only two sellers and large number of buyers. So instead of one, if there are two, we call that market as duopoly market, where the market is completely held together in terms of that. If there are in a duopoly, what happens? The profit needs to be shared according to the ratio. A monopolistic is one where it's again an imperfect, where producers sell the product and it is different from one from the another kind of thing. When I mean to say a monopolistic, this is a kind of market where we are currently existing, where you get different kinds of product for different prices. So it's a heterogeneous market. It's not a homogeneous market there. So that's where this becomes quite interesting for all us to see, because these are all the kind of markets that are existing in the current economy. Now, Chamberlain's model's assumption, which means to say that in the duopoly, he said product differentiation and non-price competition. So when we go down the sloping curves with the product differentiation, product from different sellers are yet similar but yet differentiated. Why differentiated? Because they do a little bit of promotion, they add a little bit of variable cost to it. So there is some variation in terms of presentation, variation in terms of putting the product into the minds of the consumer. Now, what's a myopia altogether in economy? When you say the myopic vision of firm arises when in the long run it consists of identical short terms, which means to say that the decision has got no great impact for the longer periods factor. Followed by which, when you start looking into the monopoly, a monopoly is a kind of situation that the market actually does not want. Why? Because it gets into an illegal situation altogether. One person dominating the market and having absolutely no competition, complete takeover, and the other entrepreneurs die out in the market. So this is a kind of a factor which people exactly don't want. But then, if I talk about a real-time example of Indian Railways always, which is quoted as a monopoly, yes, it is true. Automatically what happens there is that that particular sector is completely dominated, it is one-sided, and people find it very difficult to enter because you are not being given the permission to compete there. Duopoly, again, when you start seeing two people dominating, I would like to give the example of Reliance and Adani Group, who are dominating the Indian markets in different fronts, right from telecom services to that of cement to that of retail. I can see both these groups are playing a duopoly role these days. Why? Because they want to grab as much of share of the Indian market in various sectors, and they want to hold the market for a longer term. They don't want to give away the market altogether. What they do here is that probably they are trying to compete on similar sectors or on a diversified sectors, but what they are trying to do, they're trying to come together and hold the market for a longer time so that the other players cannot enter into those segments. Now, with that, we also talk about the price and the output factor, which are determined by market structure, classification. Some of the structures is the number of firms that are engaged in supplying the product. Will definitely talk about the competition. So if the supply is short, limited, that means the demand would be higher, the price would be higher. Product differentiation, if you can get more uniqueness about your product, yes, that matters a lot in terms of the differentiation factor. Followed by which the barriers to entry and exit. If the market becomes tough in terms of entry and exit, then that market will definitely put a lot of competition. If you have the pricing power, whether the price needs to be hiked or it needs to be lowered, that will also come into picture. The non-price competition, which we are talking about, how the market prices are formed, how the suppliers and demand aim to control the market, that also comes into it, creating an equilibrium quantity in the market. With that, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been discussed here would have been a great help to you, both in terms of practical as well as in the theoretical walk of life. These are some of the important topics that would help you definitely to understand economics better and also help you to score well in the examination. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to talk about the cost analysis and the various forms of cost. But until then, stay tuned and stay blessed. Thank you once again for joining me today on this great session.